Hey everyone, most of you watching aren't subscribed. If you haven't yet, please smash that subscribe button so that we can hit 1,000 subs together. Let's do this. I thought the night was going pretty normal. You know, just a chill first date, trying to see if there was any spark or not. We decided to meet at this little outdoor cafe that I never really noticed before, kind of tucked away behind some old shops near the Riverwalk. It wasn't crowded or fancy, just some string lights hanging overhead. A few tables with mismatched chairs, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the cool evening air. Perfect spot for something casual. When I got there, they were already waiting, looking kind of relaxed, but with this subtle, nervous energy. We sat down, started talking about dumb stuff, work, movies, stupid shows we both hated. I thought it was going pretty well. Nothing too deep, nothing too boring. Then, out of nowhere, this loud, angry voice cut through the calm like a chainsaw. At first, I thought maybe someone was just pissed at their waiter or something, but no, it was way worse. This person stormed right up to our table, face red, eyes wild, clearly way too fired up. They weren't whispering or trying to keep it down, they were yelling, and everyone around started turning to look. It was my date's ex, or so I figured, because they started shouting stuff that made zero sense to me, but my date's face went pale, like white as a sheet pale. Suddenly, the easy vibe from before just shattered. People nearby started pulling their phones out, probably thinking this was about to get viral or something. The ex wasn't just mad, they were furious, throwing around accusations and threats. It wasn't subtle or quiet, it was full in rage. There was a jealousy in their voice that made my stomach twist. It was like they wanted to scare me off just by how angry they were. I tried to stay calm, but honestly, I felt frozen. My date looked uncomfortable, but also kind of resigned, like this wasn't the first time they had to deal with this person blowing up. The ex kept getting closer, standing right over our table, pointing fingers, basically ruining any chance this could have been a normal night. What made it worse was that some of the stuff the ex said was personnel things about my date that no one else should have known. Stuff that made the whole thing feel like a public freakout, but also like a total invasion of privacy. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell my date to leave, or just walk away, but I also didn't want to make things worse. The cafe staff finally started stepping in, trying to calm the situation, but the ex wasn't having it. They kept yelling about betrayal, about promises broken, about being replaced. There was this insane mixture of anger and desperation in their voice, like they were losing something important, but couldn't control how they were losing it. I had noticed people around us getting uncomfortable, some moving their chairs back, others whispering, trying to stay out of the drama, but clearly watching every second. One couple even got up and left, probably not wanting to stick around for whatever was about to go down. My date finally tried to get the ex to leave, but it was like talking to a wall. The ex didn't care. They were too worked up, too full of rage and jealousy, to back down. They started making these wild threats, not subtle hints, but loud, clear warnings, basically telling my date that this wasn't over, and that things were going to get messy. The whole thing felt like it was spiraling. I looked around, half hoping someone would call the cops, or at least try to help more than the staff was doing. The ex finally left, storming off like a hurricane, but the tension didn't disappear. The cafe felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for what might come next. My date looked shaken, but they acted like it was no big deal, as if this kind of meltdown was just part of their life now. I wanted to say something, anything, but honestly, I just felt numb. We finished our coffee in silence, the easy conversation from before completely gone. Walking out, the streets felt colder, quieter, like the whole city was watching, but not helping. I wasn't sure if my date was scared or angry, or just used to all this chaos following them around. I wanted to ask, but didn't want to push that night. I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly things went from chill to terrifying. One minute, I'm laughing over dumb jokes, and the next, some stranger's rage is tearing through my night and my nerves. It wasn't just the yelling or the threats, it was how easily a public place turned into this messy scene of jealousy and anger. I never got the full story about the ex, or what exactly happened between them, but the whole thing left a mark. Like some dark cloud hanging over what should have been a simple date. I didn't go on a second one. Sometimes, it's not about the person you're with, but what, or who, they're still carrying with them, and that can get ugly fast. That's the last time I tried dating someone with that kind of baggage, right? There in the open. It's weird how one wild moment can change your whole view of someone, and maybe the whole idea of dating for a while. Sometimes, people's pasts aren't just memories, they're storms waiting to crash down when you least expect it, and when you're caught in the middle, you realize how little control you actually have. I don't really know what I was expecting when I agreed to meet this guy. We had chatted online for maybe 2 or 3 days, nothing intense, just the usual back and forth about music, movies, and whatnot. Honestly, it felt chill enough to meet up for coffee. No pressure, no big deal. We decided on this tiny little cafe in a part of town I barely ever went to. It was tucked behind a busy street, almost like a secret spot. The kind of place that feels quiet, but kind of alive in a weird way. Dim lighting. Mismatched chairs, some plants hanging from the ceiling. Nothing flashy, but cozy. I got there a few minutes early, ordered a black coffee because that's how I roll, and waited. When he showed up, he seemed normal enough, just a little nervous maybe. We sat down at a small table near the window. The sun was coming through in these weird patches, lighting up parts of his face and leaving other parts in shadow. Kinda like a movie scene or something, but not in a cool way. At first, the conversation was exactly what you'd expect. What I did, what he did, favorite bands, the usual stuff. But then, after a bit, he started bringing up things about me that we never talked about online, or anywhere. It wasn't small stuff either, like he mentioned my workplace. Not just the company name, but specific details about my desk setup, and the fact that I keep a little plant on my windowsill. I thought maybe I'd said something offhanded earlier, but no. I was sure I hadn't. I told myself he must have looked me up somehow, maybe checked my social media or something, but I never posted pictures of my office or anything. It didn't feel right. Then he talked about my apartment layout. Like he described how I arranged my couch, and where I keep my kitchen table. I never told him where I lived, or even the neighborhood. This wasn't some guess or lucky assumption. He sounded like he'd been inside. I tried to play it cool, maybe joke it off, but he just smiled and kept going. That's when things started to get really weird. He mentioned my childhood nickname. Now, I'm not saying I'm popular or anything, but that nickname was something only a handful of people knew, mostly family and a couple of old friends who don't live nearby anymore. I never brought it up online, never wrote about it anywhere, didn't even use it casually around new people. And here this guy was, saying it like he'd known me forever. I felt a knot in my stomach. My head started racing. How does someone know that? The cafe was still kind of busy, people coming and going, but I was hyper-focused on him. It was like this fog lifted a bit, and suddenly I was looking at all these little signs I'd ignored. He didn't just bring up facts. He was using them like he was trying to connect dots only he saw. Talking about how I probably felt when my old cat died last year. Mentioning a scar I have on my left hand from when I was a kid. Stuff that made me think, how does this person know this? He laughed off any look of confusion I gave him, saying everyone wants to know real stuff about someone they date. That made me feel even more uneasy, because it wasn't normal. At least not like this. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed how tense I was getting, but no one was paying attention. just a few couples on dates, some people typing away on laptops, and a barista who seemed to be watching the whole thing from behind the counter. I wanted to get out of there, but felt stuck in this weird bubble where leaving felt like breaking some strange invisible rule. After a while, he asked me questions that didn't make sense, like what I was scared of, what I thought about when I was alone, what I dreamed about as a kid. The way he asked wasn't natural, more like he was reading from a script. And then he said something about how he already knew the answers. That's when I realized this wasn't some normal date. I started scanning my phone, hoping for some kind of excuse or distraction, but it was dead. Battery gone. I hadn't noticed, because I was too distracted by the conversation. When I looked back up, his eyes were fixed on me, but not in a good way. It felt like he was looking through me, like I was some kind of puzzle he was trying to solve, or a character in a story he was writing. I had to get out. I didn't want to make a scene, so I pretended to check my watch, said I had to go. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. He told me he hoped this wasn't the last time we saw each other. As I left the cafe, the late afternoon sun hit me hard. I felt lightheaded. Outside, the city noises were too loud, like they were rushing in to fill the silence that had been building inside me. I walked fast, trying to shake off the feeling that he was watching me, or worse, following me. For days after that, I kept looking over my shoulder. I changed my routes to work, started double-checking my locks. Messages showed up on my phone, texts from numbers I didn't recognize, sometimes just a single word, or an emoji. No explanation, no name. I went through everything I'd shared online and erased almost all of it. I even thought about moving, but that felt like admitting defeat. I never saw him again, and his dating profile disappeared. It was like he vanished, but the feeling didn't go away. Sometimes I wonder if he was watching me even before we met. How long he'd been collecting pieces of my life without me knowing. That's the kind of date you don't tell people about because you're embarrassed, but because it's too damn creepy to explain. I don't know who he was, or what he wanted, but I do know one thing: some people aren't looking for love. They're looking for control, and you never see it coming. I'm not even sure what I was expecting when I swiped right on this guy's profile. His pictures looked decent normal, honestly. Not like those totally staged photos where people stand in front of a sunset pretending they don't care. His photos were casual, a mix of hiking shots, a couple of selfies, and some group pictures with friends. Nothing crazy. The bio was simple: into books, coffee, and bad puns. Totally harmless. We messaged for a couple of weeks before we finally set a date. We agreed to meet at this small, out-of-the-way coffee shop that I'd never been to before. I liked the idea of something low-key and a little different from the usual crowded chains. It was on the edge of town, near this old industrial area that had a weird vibe, like half the buildings were abandoned, but there was a new art gallery or something squeezed in between. I got there first, ordered a cappuccino, and waited. When he showed up, I noticed right away he didn't quite look like his pictures. Not in a, oh, he's a bit heavier or thinner way. More like the details were, wrong. His hair was the same color, but cut differently, and kind of greasy. His eyes were the same shape, but way duller, almost like they didn't quite focus right. His smile was forced, and when he laughed, it sounded off, like a recording playing back a little too fast. He caught me staring and just shrugged it off. Said something like, "Everyone edits their pics, right? It's just how it works these days." I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I nodded, and we went inside. The coffee shop was smaller than I imagined. The walls were covered in old posters and weird paintings, and the whole place smelled like burnt espresso and something else, something faintly chemical or metallic. It wasn't unpleasant, just odd. There were a few other people scattered around, mostly working on laptops or whispering in corners. We found a table near the back, under some flickering lights. The flickering made his face look even stranger, like parts of it would dim or brighten randomly. I tried to ignore it at first. The conversation was okay. He asked about my job, what I liked to do for fun, my favorite movies, but there was this intensity behind his questions, like he was trying too hard to memorize everything. He kept glancing down at his phone, typing stuff, then looking back at me. It was like he was taking notes. When I asked about his hobbies, his answers were vague, almost rehearsed. He mentioned reading, but couldn't name an author he liked. Said he enjoyed hiking, but didn't have any favorite spots. The more he talked, the less real it felt. I noticed something else too. He kept touching his face, like he was uncomfortable in his own skin, adjusting his jawline, rubbing the sides of his neck, almost like he was trying to reshape himself in some invisible mirror. I remember the moment I realized how weird this was getting. He reached into his bag and pulled out his phone, showing me a picture. I thought it would be a selfie, or maybe a screenshot of something funny. But it was a picture of me taken from somewhere online, a photo I didn't even remember posting. He said he liked it a lot, kept repeating how perfect it was. I felt cold, like something was creeping under my skin. I told him I didn't know where he got it from, but he just smiled that same odd smile and said he was glad he found it. We finished our drinks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just on a date. I was being studied, like I was some kind of project or experiment. When I got up to leave, I noticed the barista giving me a strange look. I asked if everything was okay, but she just whispered something about how this guy had been coming by for weeks, always alone, always quiet. She said she didn't know much, just that some customers felt uneasy around him. I left quickly. But the weirdness didn't end there. Over the next few days, I started noticing strange things. Messages from unknown numbers, pictures of me sent anonymously, things moved around in my apartment that I was sure I hadn't touched. My phone sometimes felt cold in my hand, and I caught myself looking over my shoulder constantly. I tried to tell a friend about it, but I couldn't explain it well. It wasn't a direct threat or attack. It was something slower, something that made me feel like I was trapped in someone else's obsession. I blocked his number and reported the strange messages, but no one could trace them. His profile on the app disappeared the next day. I looked for the coffee shop online, but it seemed to vanish too, like it was never really there. Every time I scroll through old photos on my phone, I catch a glimpse of that picture he showed. Mitha, one he said was perfect, and it still feels like he's out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to come back. That's the last first date I ever went on. Some things just don't add up, and some people aren't who they pretend to be. And honestly, sometimes it's better not to know what you're really dealing with. I didn't even really want to go on this date, to be honest. I'd been off dating apps for a while after a string of weird situations, and I was kind of enjoying the peace. But this guy kept popping up in my likes. Nothing pushy, just polite. Little comments here and there. He'd mentioned the book I had listed in my bio, asked about the band on my playlist, stuff like that. It was harmless. He was good looking in a clean, quiet way, and eventually I figured, why not? It's one coffee. If it's awkward, I can leave. We plan to meet at this little bookstore cafe in a part of town that's pretty walkable. Bright windows, lots of foot traffic, and the kind of place you could casually disappear from if needed. I even texted a friend the name and time just to be safe, like always. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 drinks. I didn't tell him what I wanted yet, but he guessed it somehow down to the exact milk substitute and everything. I made a joke about it being lucky, and he said something about how he just had a sense. It didn't feel like a red flag at the time. It felt like maybe he'd read my vibe well. The first 20 minutes or so were normal. He asked questions, listened, laughed, in the right places. But after a while, the conversation started to feel weirdly curated, like he had answers ready for everything I said. I told him where I grew up, and he said he almost moved there once. I mentioned my favorite movie, and he said he owned a signed script. It kept happening. Same taste in music. Same favorite color. Even the same irrational fear of escalators. It was too aligned. I started to feel a little off. Like the version of me he was reacting to wasn't really meat, was a mold he'd already shaped in his head. He kept staring a bit too long, like he was studying me. Not in a creepy way exactly, just ... intensely. Every time I looked down at my drink or adjusted my sleeve, his eyes followed. I remember thinking, this guy's either way too into me, or he's memorizing something. I excused myself to the bathroom halfway through just to get a break. When I came back, he had already paid for the drinks and said he'd ordered us some pastries to go. I told him I didn't want to stay out much longer, and he offered to walk me home. I said no, that I had errands to run first, and he didn't argue, but he did seem weirdly disappointed, like genuinely hurt, not just bummed. We said goodbye, and I thought that was the end of it. But that night, he sent a long message saying how amazing the connection felt and how he hadn't talked to someone like that in years. I didn't know what to say, so I just responded politely and kind of left it at that. Then it got strange. The next day, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw that someone had followed me with a username that looked like a burner account. No profile picture, no posts, no followers. The name had a weird mix of letters and numbers, but the only person it followed was me. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except that the account liked a photo I'd posted years ago, one where I had a different haircut and wore a necklace I'd lost a long time ago. Later that night, my friend texted me. She said, the guy I went on the date with looked familiar. Really familiar. She sent me a screenshot from a Reddit post, some old thread, in a local true crime forum. The photo was of a girl who went missing 3 years ago. Her name was Anna. She was last seen in the same part of town, after going on a date with someone she met online. She looked almost exactly like me. Same face shape, same haircut I had back then, even the same weird chipped front tooth. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. It was like looking at a version of myself from a parallel timeline. I felt sick. I clicked through the comments. The guy she went out with was never officially identified, but someone had posted a sketchy picture from a grainy security cam. Same build, same jawline, same slightly too perfect smile. The case went cold, and no one ever found her. I didn't know what to do. I blocked his number, unmatched him on the app, and locked down my social media. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started getting random calls from unknown numbers. Silent voicemails. Once, I came home and found a single flower on my doormat. Not in plastic or anything, just placed there, like a message. I filed a police report, but there wasn't much they could do. I didn't have any proof of a crime, a bad date, a weird coincidence, and a guy who was suddenly impossible to find. His dating profile was gone. The phone number stopped working. It was like he vanished. For a while, I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just some random guy who got too attached and disappeared when it got awkward. But sometimes, late at night, I go back to that Reddit post and look at the photo of the missing girl again. And every single time, it feels like I'm looking at a version of myself that didn't get out of that coffee shop. So this happened about a year ago, and I've never really talked about it in detail because it still messes with my head sometimes. It wasn't like a horror movie moment with dramatic music or anything. It was quiet, stretched out, and way too real. The kind of thing that creeps up on you slowly, and by the time you realize it's bad, You're already way past the point of fixing it. I met this guy on Hinge. He seemed pretty cool. Not too smooth, not weird, normal looking. He worked in logistics, whatever that actually means. He had a dog in one of his photos and mentioned his sister a couple of times, which made him feel more grounded. We talked for like a week before he asked if I wanted to meet up. We ended up doing dinner at this diner that was kind of halfway between where we both lived. I almost drove myself, but he offered to pick me up. He didn't push or anything, just said he'd be happy to drive, so I didn't have to deal with park. I thought about it for a bit and said sure. I told myself I'd be fine. I even sent my friend his name and license plate, because I'd gotten into the habit of doing that after a few bad dates. So dinner goes fine. Totally fine. He talked a little too much about his job, but I didn't mind. It was one of those low-pressure nights where you're not sure if you're really clicking with the person. But there's nothing wrong either. It was just decent. I wasn't planning on seeing him again, but I figured we'd finish the night, and that would be that. When we got back in the car, I told him my address again, and he nodded and pulled out of the lot. I wasn't really paying attention at first. I was looking at my phone, texting my friend, kind of zoning out. The windows were cracked, music was playing softly, and the streetlights blurred past like usual. Then I realized we were heading in the wrong direction, not just slightly off, but completely away from the part of town I lived in. I assumed he was taking a different route, so I asked about it. He just said something about a shortcut. I let it go at first, even though I knew for a fact that there wasn't a shortcut from that area to my place, especially not one that started by going west into farmland, but then we passed a sign for a county line. I didn't even know where we were anymore. I tried to stay calm, but my voice came out more serious when I asked again where exactly were we going. That's when he locked the doors. No sound or anything, just a soft click, and I saw the lock drop down on the passenger side. It was quiet for a second. He didn't look at me, just kept driving. The road got darker, and the streetlights disappeared. We were on some narrow two-lane highway with trees closing in from both sides. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to freak out too soon. I told myself maybe he really thought this was a shortcut. Maybe he just didn't realize how far off we were. Then he started talking again. Not about directions or the road, just weird stuff. He said something about how he had this feeling about me, how some people just fit. He said it was rare, that kind of connection, and when it shows up, you have to listen to it. He started going on about fate, and how people cross paths for a reason, how certain moments aren't random. I didn't respond. I just stared out the window, trying to figure out if I could open the door, or if we were going too fast. I didn't know if we were near anything. No buildings, no gas stations, nothing. Just trees and long stretches of blacktop. I couldn't see any cars behind us either. He asked me if I believed in destiny. I didn't answer. Then he started saying something about bloodlines, how certain people have rare qualities, how you can feel it, almost like a vibration. He said I had that he could tell when he met me. At that point, I knew something was seriously wrong. I reached down and slowly slid my phone into my sleeve. I didn't want him to see it in my hand. I turned off the sound and sent my location to my friend. Even though I had barely 1 bar of service, I texted her something short, like not right, and hoped it would go through. I started watching the side of the road, looking for anything: houses, lights, a mailbox, something I could use as a landmark, or maybe somewhere to run if I had to. He kept talking, but I stopped listening. I was scanning everything, calculating how fast we were going, how much force it would take to open the door, whether I could grab the wheel. My body was in that state where you feel frozen and wired at the same time. Finally, we came to a turnoff. It wasn't marked, just a gravel road that cut off into some dense trees. He slowed down. I think the only reason I'm even here to write This is because a car came up behind us at that exact moment. Headlights lit up the whole car, and I saw his eyes in the mirror. He looked annoyed, like, actually irritated, then sped up again and turned back onto the main road. I don't know if he got spooked or changed his mind, but he drove in total silence for a while. Eventually, we hit a familiar highway, and I realized we were headed back toward town. He pulled into a parking lot not far from my place and unlocked the doors without saying anything. I got out fast, didn't wait for a goodbye, didn't look back. I ran to a nearby corner store and stayed inside until I was sure he was gone. My friend ended up picking me up. When I reported it later, there wasn't much to go on. The cops couldn't really do anything. He hadn't technically broken any laws, just creeped me out and went the wrong way. His dating profile disappeared 2 days later, and I couldn't find him again after that. I still don't know what would have happened if that car hadn't shown up behind us. I think about it a lot. That empty road, that locked door, the way he said my name like he'd already decided something about me. Never taking a ride home again. Doesn't matter how normal they seem. I wasn't even planning to go on a date that week. I'd had a long stretch of terrible matches, awkward conversations, ghosting, weird comments to messages in. But then I matched with this guy who seemed ... normal. And by normal, I don't mean boring. He was thoughtful, a little funny, and didn't launch into anything too heavy right away. Just easy conversation. He worked in biomedical research, which sounded impressive but not too intense, and he lived in a town not far from me. He wasn't pushy about meeting up, which was rare. So I was the one who eventually suggested we hang out. He offered to cook dinner at his place. Said he preferred something casual and low-key for a first date. I hesitated a little. Normally, I don't go to someone's house the first time we meet, but he didn't seem sketchy. Plus, he offered to send me the address, a photo of his place, even the label on the wine he planned to serve. I texted a friend the info before I left, just in case. Always figured it was better to be safe than sorry. His house was in this quiet, residential area, one of those older neighborhoods, with tall trees and narrow driveways. Not run down, but not exactly charming either. The house itself looked clean from the outside. A little boxy, but whatever. I parked in front and texted him I'd arrived. He opened the door almost immediately and waved me in. The inside of his house was ... sterile. Not like dirty or messy, just the opposite. It looked staged, like a model home or an Airbnb. No photos, no clutter, no signs that someone actually lived there. Everything was neutral-colored gray, white, beige. The lighting was dim but not in a cozy way. It made it hard to see the corners of the room clearly. He took my coat and gestured toward the kitchen, said dinner was almost ready. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Something was off. Not horrible, just strange. It was like a mix of bleach and meat, and maybe something metallic. He had candles burning on the counter, like he was trying to cover it up. But they only made it worse. I tried not to overthink it. I told myself maybe he'd just cleaned before I got there. Maybe he used weird spices. But the longer I sat in that kitchen, the more it started to get to me. He poured me a glass of wine and started asking me questions while he finished prepping. At first, it was the usual stuff: how long I'd been on the app, what kind of music I liked, if I was close with my family. Then he asked what blood type one was. I thought he was joking, so I laughed. But he didn't laugh back. He just nodded like that was useful information. Then he asked if I had any allergies, if I'd ever had surgery, if I was an organ donor. That's when I started to feel weird, like really weird. I tried to make light of it, changed the subject, asked him about his work. He started going off about human biology and cellular regeneration, and it got complicated fast. I zoned out a bit until I heard him say something like, Some people's tissue responds better than others. I didn't like how he said it. The food was ready a few minutes later. He served us both, but before I even touched mine, I asked to use the bathroom, mostly just to get out of the kitchen and regroup for a second. He pointed down the hall, said it was the second door on the right. I went down the hall slowly, mostly because I was trying to figure out what exactly was bothering me so much. Everything in that house just felt off. Too quiet, too empty, too controlled. As I walked past the first door, I noticed it had a keypad lock on it. A big black one, like something you'd see on a lab or a storage unit. Not a bedroom door. The one after that had a regular knob, but when I tried to open it, it was locked. I kept walking, found the bathroom, and closed the door behind me. Inside, it was spotless. No toiletries, no hand towels, just a bottle of soap and a candle burning next to the mirror. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to stay calm, but the unease in my stomach was turning into full-on dread. I pulled out my phone and texted my friend that things were getting weird and that I might need a call to get out of there. When I got back to the kitchen, he was sitting at the table, hands folded, watching me. My plate was still untouched. His was half gone. I sat down and made some excuse about having a headache. Said I probably shouldn't drink more wine. Might have to cut the night short. He just nodded again, that same blank nod, and said something about how not everyone's body reacts the same way. That was it. I got up, said I needed to leave, and grabbed my coat. He didn't argue. He just followed me to the door in complete silence and held it open. I walked to my car without looking back. I locked the doors the second I got in and drove off, checking the rear-view mirror constantly. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station about 10 minutes away, parked under the lights and just sat there. I blocked his number immediately. When I looked up his profile again later that night, it was already gone, deleted, like he'd never been on the app at all. A few days later, I was still so weirded out, I looked up his name online. Nothing. Not on LinkedIn, not in any company directories, nothing about biomedical research or any of the things he claimed to do. I tried reverse image searching one of the photos he used on his profile. Still nothing. That house. I drove by it again the next week, just to prove to myself I hadn't imagined everything. It was empty. For sale. The listing said it had been vacant for months. I don't know who I met that night. I don't know what those locked doors were hiding, or why he cared so much about my blood type. But I do know I'll never go to someone's house on a first date again. Not after that. I'm still not totally sure what happened that night. I've gone over it in my head more times than I can count, trying to figure out if I missed something obvious. Maybe I did. Maybe I ignored a red flag or two. Or maybe some people are just better at pretending than we think. It started pretty normally. I'd been talking to this guy on a dating app for a couple of weeks. He seemed smart and chill funny, but not in a try-hard way. His photos looked recent, nothing overly polished. He said he worked freelance in it, and liked puzzles, escape rooms, that kind of thing. I'm into puzzles too, so I thought it was kind of a fun niche interest to bond over. We agreed to meet up in person for a first date. Instead of doing the usual dinner or coffee thing, he suggested this new escape room place that had just opened up in a neighboring town. I looked it up and the website was super sleek, lots of dark, moody lighting, mysterious themed rooms, and a big section about how it was fully immersive and not like other escape games. Honestly, I was into it. I'd done a few escape rooms before and figured it would be more interesting than just sitting across a table awkwardly. We met in the parking lot. He was already there, leaning against his car, smiling like we'd known each other longer than we had. He looked the same as his photos, casual, a little underdressed maybe, but normal. He led the way to the entrance, which was this plain gray door tucked between two closed shops in a small strip mall. No flashy sign, just a printed sheet taped inside a window that said Room 3 open tonight. Arrival by 7 p.m. Inside, it was dark and kind of cold. The entryway looked like it was still being set up. No front desk, no receptionist, just a narrow hallway with flickering overhead lights and a red door at the end. I figured maybe they were going for some kind of horror theme. He pressed a buzzer next to the door, and a few seconds later, it clicked open. That should have been my first clue that something was off. Most escape rooms have some kind of staff greeting or safety talk, right? But I didn't want to be the weird one freaking out over nothing, so I just followed him inside. The room itself was decorated like an old motel lobby. Faded wallpaper, a broken vending machine, a desk with fake cigarette burns on it, a scratchy, old radio was playing static in the corner. I thought the theme was pretty cool, honestly. There were props around suitcases, dusty keys, fake bloodstains on the carpet. He said the theme was disappearance room, and the whole goal was to figure out what happened to the motel owner before time ran out. The door clicked shut behind us, and I heard the lock slide into place. I figured the game had started. We looked around, checking drawers and poking around the furniture like you do in any escape room. But after about 10 minutes, I realized something weird. There were no clues, no puzzles, no instructions, just a room that looked creepy and a bunch of stuff that didn't seem to connect. He didn't seem to notice. He kept opening drawers and pretending to find clues, but none of it made any sense. A torn photo, a Bible with pages ripped out, a burned phone. No code locks, no combination boxes, nothing. Just junk. Then the lights flickered. I laughed, thinking it was part of the game, but then they cut out completely. We were standing in pitch black, and it went completely silent-like. Even the fake static from the radio stopped. That's when I started feeling uneasy. Not just nervous, but like something wasn't right. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The room looked different somehow. The fake bloodstains looked wetter. The phone on the desk, the one I thought was just a prop, buzzed and lit up. But it wasn't part of a clue. It had a missed call on the screen from someone labeled "Do not answer." I asked him if he knew what was going on. He just smiled. That weird kind of smile where it doesn't reach the eyes. He said something about how this room's supposed to be more intense than most. I tried the door. It was locked. Not just escape room locked, but actually bolted shut from the outside. I banged on it and yelled, but no one came. No voices, no intercom. Just silence. I started pacing, phone light bouncing off the walls. He just stood there watching me. Eventually, I asked him again, what was this? Was this a prank? A joke? He didn't answer. He just sat down in one of the dusty chairs in the corner, pulled out a small notebook, and started writing. Not saying anything, just writing. I backed away. I kept trying to open the door, even tried kicking it. Nothing. I thought about calling 911, but I had no signal. No Wi-Fi, nothing. At some point, I don't even know how much time had passed, he stood up, walked over to a little cabinet in the wall, and opened it. Inside was another room, smaller, darker, with something that looked like a cot and a tray with food on it, like someone had been staying in there. The worst part, there were scratch marks on the inside of the cabinet door, dozens of them. I lost it. I started screaming, yelling that I was leaving, threatening to break the window. That's when the lights came back on. The door buzzed open like nothing had happened. No dramatic music, no announcement, just an unlocked door. I didn't wait. I ran out, straight down the hallway and back into the parking lot. When I turned around, he wasn't behind me. The door had shut again. I jumped in my car and drove straight home. I tried to report the escape room to the police, but when they checked it out a few days later, the building was empty. No signage, No props, no furniture, just a dusty, abandoned storefront. The number on the website didn't work anymore. The website itself was gone 2 days after that. The guy's dating profile, deleted. Like it never existed. Our messages disappeared. I tried reverse searching his photos. Nothing came up. I don't know who he was. I don't know what that place actually was. But every now and then, I check online to see if that escape room pops up again under a different name. And sometimes, I dream about that notebook he was writing in. I keep wondering if my name was in it. So this happened a few months ago. I haven't really told many people about it, mostly because it just weirds me out every time I think about it. I didn't get hurt or anything like that, but it messed with my head. Like I still wonder about it when I'm trying to fall asleep. I met this guy on a dating app. Nothing sketchy, just one of the regular ones everyone uses. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks. His profile seemed normal. Pictures looked recent. We had a few common interests. He liked hiking, said he was a graphic designer, lived in a town about 45 minutes from mine. We texted every day for a while, exchanged dumb memes, that kind of thing. He was funny and didn't overdo it. Honestly, he seemed like one of the more normal people I'd come across on those apps. We eventually agreed to meet for coffee. He suggested this little cafe in a town that was sort of in between both of us. I'd never been there before, but it looked cozy on Google, and the drive wasn't too bad. I got there about 10 minutes early and grabbed a seat near the window. He showed up right on time. Looked exactly like his photos, maybe even better in person. He was dressed well, not over the top or anything, just clean. He smiled when he saw me and sat down, and from the start, it felt natural. We talked about music, our jobs, travel, nothing deep, just easy conversation. He had this calm energy that made me feel weirdly comfortable, like I could have known him for longer than 2 weeks. Anyway, while we were sitting there talking, I noticed this bulletin board on the wall behind him. One of those cluttered ones with local event flyers, business cards, guitar lessons, babysitters. I wasn't really paying attention to it at first, but then my eyes sort of locked on this one flyer. It was a missing person poster. I wasn't trying to stare or be weird, but it was hard to look away because the person in the photo looked exactly like the guy sitting across from me. Like not, kind of similar. Not oh wow. Same haircut. I mean, identical. Same jawline, same nose. Same small scar on the side of his chin. I don't even know how I noticed that detail, but I had. It was him. I stopped hearing what he was saying for a few seconds. My brain was just kind of frozen. I looked back at the flyer again, like maybe I'd imagined it, or read it wrong. But no, the name on the poster was different from the name he gave me. But the photo, it was him. I didn't know what to do. I kept nodding and pretending to listen, while my brain tried to process if this was some kind of prank. Was it an old photo? Did he have a twin? Was it one of those people who fake their identity for some reason? I wasn't ready to ask about it, not right there, so I just tried to play it cool. The flyer said the guy had gone missing about 5 months ago, reported missing by his roommate. It didn't have a ton of details, just that he left home one night and didn't come back. I tried to sneak a photo of it with my phone, but I couldn't get a good angle without being obvious, and I didn't want him to notice me acting different. I was quiet for the rest of the date. Probably too quiet, but he didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and was just good at hiding it. He kept talking and smiling like nothing was weird. I left shortly after, said I had an appointment and needed to head out. He offered to walk me to my car, but I declined. He didn't push. Once I got in my car, I just sat there for a few minutes, trying to decide if I was being dramatic or if this was actually something serious. I took a photo of the flyer through the window once he was back inside. The quality was bad, but I could still see the face and the contact number. I went home and Googled the name from the flyer. Found a couple of small articles about the missing guy. Same photo. One article mentioned that police had no leads and that his social media accounts had all gone dark the day after he vanished. It also said he was originally from another state and had only moved here about a year before disappearing. Here's the thing though. When I tried searching the guy I'd been talking to, the name he gave got nothing. No Instagram, no LinkedIn, no old Facebook accounts, not even a mention in group tags or comments. It was like the person I met didn't exist. I reported the flyer to the local police department tip line. I sent them a message with the photo. I took and said I wasn't sure, but I thought I'd seen the person at a cafe that afternoon. I didn't leave my name. I didn't want to get involved if it turned out to be nothing. A few days later, I went back to the app to check his profile again. It was gone, like completely erased. Our message history was still there, but it just said deleted user. I even tried reverse image searching his profile pictures, but got no matches, like they were never online anywhere else. I've tried to forget about it, tried to convince myself it was a weird coincidence or some case of mistaken identity, but I can't, because there's one thing that keeps sticking with me. When we were sitting there, before I saw the flyer, he told me something weird. He said he used to be a totally different person before he moved here, that he'd left everything behind: friends, family, social media, all the noise, he said. He made it sound like some dramatic life reboot. At the time, I thought he was being philosophical or whatever. Now, I'm not so sure. I still have no idea who he really was, and I never saw anything else in the news. No update on the missing guy. No arrests. Nothing. Just gone. Like he never existed. Or like he's still out there, just pretending to be someone else.